So I've got one of my old clients here, old, she's actually young. Her name's Jordan. And hi, Jordan.
I
Um, I reached out, or Jordan reached out to me not that long ago and just said hi and thanks for kind of helping her in the past. So Jordan, let's go back to those days. It's been quite a while now.
Yeah.
Um, you were how old when I first met you? I think
I think I was about 14. I was a freshman in high school.
a freshman in high school, and you've graduated college now. You're 21.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's been a while. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was really happy and surprised to hear from you. And so tell me about your experience when we first met. What you came to see me for and what was going on? Just
Yeah. So I was having severe hip pain. I was playing water polo in high school and I was getting out of the pool every day crying in pain. Like my hips were hurting so bad. I started going to the doctor, x-rays, this, that. They basically told me that the ball and socket, like the ball in my hip was too large for the socket, and that's what was causing pain. They sent me to physical therapy. I did 13 and a half weeks of physical therapy, and
wow.
I think I was in more pain after it than I ever felt like any relief from it. And so I finally went to another doctor. They were basically saying the only option was to do hip surgery because the ball and socket was too large and physical therapy wasn't working. And my dad was like, my parents were like, absolutely not. You're 14 years old. Like, you're not having hip surgery at 14. Like, that's
Wow.
ridiculous.
Yeah, so
And
your dad had known me from the
yeah,
company I was working with, and fortunate for you that he knew there was another resource, right? So
yeah.
so I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted
Yeah.
to share that that's how you got to know me. When your
Yeah.
dad said, "Hey, there's someone else I want you to go see," what were your thoughts? Like, oh gosh, not another person or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit because I was just like, physical therapy isn't working. Like, why are we doing this? And I feel like, at that young age, I'm just told like the doctors know everything, right? And so it's kind of like that idea of these doctors are telling me that this is the problem and that I need surgery. Like, I don't think physical therapy is going to work. Like, I've been doing it for 13 weeks,
Right.
months on end, like, and nothing's getting better. Like, I don't know why you're telling me this is a good idea, but like, you're my parents, so I got to listen to you. I guess I'll go. And so
Sure.
I mean, I think it was a little bit of just, I guess, annoyed because it's like, this isn't going to work. So, like, why are we trying
Yeah.
again?
And I get that a lot, Jordan, with clients that I work with now. They've gone through chiropractic, physical therapy, whatever, and they just said, well, it's kind of the same thing. They don't really know,
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm getting at. So that was kind of what was going on with you. What's interesting is I didn't know when your dad came to me to ask if I could help, I didn't know that you were actually facing surgery. Your dad didn't tell me that for years
Yeah.
later. I was shocked that was why you guys came to me. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty exciting. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
So you came in. I remember you coming in. You were bouncing around, you're a happy girl. And I started performing some assessments on you, right?
Yeah.
And just from what I was doing, um, was it different than what you experienced, or was it kind of similar to what other people had been working with?
And I think it was very different. I mean, you definitely, obviously, coming in with hip pain, look at the hips. But then I think what separated from what I was used to is like looking at other aspects of my body and how they connect and work together. And
A
that's
whole
something,
body connection.
yeah, and that's something nobody had ever looked at. You kind of went through what is your history with injuries in the past. And by going through that, I talked about I had ankle injuries, I'd broken one foot, tore ligaments in another foot. Like
Remember that.
I had ankle injuries and knee injuries and blah, blah, blah. And so it was like you took a look at that and kind of the whole picture rather than just like, hey, your hip hurts. Let's look at your hip. It was, oh, you've had these other injuries. And then kind of going down that road, like how I was compensating for those injuries, which was causing hip pain. Yes, I probably do have a structural issue with my hip, but like how those other things are affecting it or making it worse. Cause you don't just one day have hip pain if it's actually a structural issue, right? Like, it doesn't just start one day randomly and that's the problem. Like,
Well, what was
there's other,
interesting is you hadn't had an injury. You hadn't fallen. You hadn't gotten
yeah,
hurt. There weren't any we call them mechanisms of injury. It wasn't anything like that. It just all of a sudden came on a young, healthy girl, fit athlete, which was interesting to me. I remember telling your dad, he came into me and he explained the situation very briefly. And he said, "Can you help her, meaning you?" And I said, "To be honest, I don't know, but bring her in. Let's do an assessment." I said, all I can tell you is if she's been in physical therapy for the extent of the time that you were there, that they must have missed something.
Yeah.
And to your point, the challenge with physical therapy is with insurance, they're only really supposed to look at the area that you're discussing as in pain or what the doctor wrote a script for. And yet, what's interesting is nobody talks about the rest of the body. I don't get it, but I'm glad we had gone through that. So we did this assessment, and it was different. You started. I remember a light bulb went off for you when we went through the assessment, because I could tell like you were really you were engaged, you were kind of listening, and you were participating in the assessment and kind of trying to understand it. But do you remember what I did with you that changed everything? What was it?
When you put the block of wood and had my ankles like taken out of the equation. So I think you had me like squat down just normal, do a
Yeah.
squat, and how bad my hips hurt. And then you
Well,
had me
not just how bad your hips hurt, but how much your knees collapsed in.
yeah.
Yeah, they were like almost touching every time you squatted down.
Yeah, and then you had me do it standing on a board, like taking my ankles out of the equation, and had me do it again. And it was like a whole different movement, way less pain. And I was kind of like, I mean, at first, obviously not knowing what you know, I was just like, okay, cool. But I didn't
Right.
know like what that meant, and the fact that like you took my ankles out of the equation and I wasn't feeling pain. And it was like, oh, that's the problem. Like your
Well,
ankles.
that's what we remember. We went through the assessment. I only did 2 assessments on you. I did all of them, but the 2 that stuck out to me was your ankle mobility and your toe touching pattern. And based on your history of ankle injuries and the range of motion you had, which was 0 in that ankle joint, once we were able to determine that that was the possibly the cause of all this, I just showed you with that simple movement that even though we were doing squats without that block, you had a lot of pain in your hip the whole time. Within a second of taking the ankle out of the equation, you were pain free. So it told, all I was trying to help was illustrate to you is that there is something more than just your ankle. And I think that was, in my opinion, that was the light that went off for you. That was what you got. That was what committed you to doing what I said we were going to work on, because it was different than what you'd experienced. No one had talked about that. And so I sent you home with a couple exercises, right? I think it was only 6 exercises, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe not 5 or 6 exercises. So what was your experience? I remember you went home. I talked to your dad like a week later, and he's like, I don't know. She doesn't mention anything other than she doesn't have any pain, right?
Yeah.
So explain that to me. I mean, they go back 14 years. I mean, at 14 years old, do you remember what was going on the first week?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing my dad always told me is like, make sure you're doing them as often as he's telling you, do them those 3-4 times a day when you're supposed to. Because if you're not doing them, it's not going to work. You can't say, oh, it didn't work and you did it one time in 6 weeks or something like that,
Right.
So do them as often as he's telling you. And I think within like 3 to 4 days, I was definitely feeling a huge difference. And then I'd say between 3 and 4 weeks, I like was completely pain free. Couldn't even remember that it happened,
Crazy.
And yeah. And so I think for me, like the difference in the exercises you gave me is I feel like they were more exercises versus what we were doing in physical therapy was a lot of just like, I felt like stretching or rolling out my IT band or those kinds of things, but it wasn't rebuilding any muscle around it to help the offset it,
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was doing a lot that was just stretching me out, but it's like, okay, now I got to build that muscle to help the pain and things like that. And I feel like that's what I didn't get from physical therapy prior. But the exercises you gave me were not just stretching out and helping, but actually like rebuilding the muscle and working them in a way that was positive and the right way.
Yeah. So I remember you had very little ankle mobility, and you had a very poor toe touching pattern. And anyone in the fitness or healthcare industry would say she needs to stretch her hamstrings, right? And that's probably a lot of what you did. I know that they gave you some exercises to do for your hips, but they were focusing on the hips because that's where the pain was. It's got to be a hip problem, the knees collapsing in. Soon, I remember your dad, he said during that assessment, he said, oh my God, her knees didn't turn in. I said, exactly. And that was the coolest thing. So that's pretty awesome. So now we're 21 now. You've gone through quite a few years.
Yeah.
Where are we at now? I mean, I hadn't even talked to you. This is the first time I talked to you.
Yeah, I mean, I went on to play water polo in college. Like,
Wow.
I was captain of my water polo team in college, and then, and we were
Congrats.
like a new team and stuff. So it was really like a cool experience to be able to bring what I did in high school, playing for a really great high school team, to go and start a new program in a college. And I went on to do that. I would say there are honestly still exercises that you have given me that I do on a weekly basis, and it's because first of all, I know they work. And second of all, more preventative of I know that these are issues I've had in the past and I want to
Sure.
continue to work on those things. I'm not doing them as often and probably as much as I even should, but at least doing something rather than just waiting for pain to start. And I think
But you
that's,
have an awareness now.
yeah,
And this is one of the things I try to share with people. The challenging part, especially where you were at, was there was the only light at the end of the tunnel was surgery for you. And that
yeah,
was what you were convinced of.
yeah,
Imagine if you at 14, you had surgery, they weren't
yeah,
going to find anything. What were they going to do in there? And I don't know if you would have made it to collegiate level
yeah,
water polo. You would have had at least a good year off of swimming. That would
yep,
have changed a lot of directions you went. So if anything, I have to believe that what we went through, that experience, teaching you about your body mechanics, it gave you, I'm hoping that it maybe gave you enough awareness to say, although this is, I always call it the special test. It's your special test has to be that ankle mobility or that toe touch.
yeah,
And when you're feeling like it's a little restricted, you've got a way to fix it. And it's interesting. It's been, well, what now, 6 years, 7 years,
yeah,
and you haven't reached back out to me for help. And my goal is to give you the tools to help yourself. And so I'd have to believe that maybe some of the stuff I taught you, you have some self-awareness
yeah,
as you're training, because you weren't just swimming, you were training in college for water.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, great.
Yeah,
So
so I definitely think overall, like just that awareness of like, hey, it's not always this, wherever your pain is, that's not always the issue. You got to look at it from like a bigger sense and build muscles and help your whole body because you compensate a lot. And I didn't really realize how much my ankles were compensating. And
well,
it
your
was,
body was compensating because of your
yeah,
ankles. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
causing pain in my hip. Yeah.
Yeah, we improved some ankle mobility that improved the gait patterns. We established some new exercises to get your body to understand what to do with that new pattern. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm so excited to hear from you. And it's kind of cool. I haven't heard from you in 7 years. And I
Yeah.
talk about you all the time because you were like this shock to me, because it was really 3 years after that we had gone through that at 14 that I asked you and your dad for a
Yeah.
testimonial for my book. And he said, anything for you, Mike. You saved my daughter from surgery. I said, whoa, what? He said, what do you think I came to you? He never told me that you were going to have surgery on your hip. So I'm glad to hear it from your own perspective. It's kind of cool. So Jordan, let's wrap up here. But what would you, if you could talk to someone else out there, whether it's someone young or someone that's old, that is going through an experience, what recommendations or suggestions would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I learned was just being more aware of what my body is doing through movements. I now being out of college and stuff, I'm a huge go to the gym and lift person and all that, but I've completely changed the way I've done that. When I was first in high school and whatever, we were just doing it. Hey, do this movement. Cool. And I wasn't really thinking about, okay, well, where are my knees in comparison to my
Awesome.
ankles and my hips and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and just now having kind of that understanding when I lift now in the gym, I think in a whole different way of like injury prevention in some ways, not just building muscle, like, hey, I want to be strong and look good and whatever. It's about like, okay, well, if I don't do the movement right, even if it's at a lower weight, you want to do it right because otherwise you're going to hurt yourself and you're not aware of like, hey, your knees shouldn't be going this far over your ankles or your ankles are doing this. Like those kinds of things have definitely changed the way I've worked out. And I think having that awareness of what your body's doing, not just doing it mindlessly, actually allows you to get those results you want because your body's doing it in a healthy way, not having an injury that then sets you back, that you're not reaching those goals.
No, exactly. And a lot of different, you're going to get a lot of different benefits from exercise. If you
Yeah.
can create that foundation of movement, of strong, healthy movement, then you get that many more benefits. Because at some point, you can only build strength, aesthetics on a weak foundation, and it's going to collapse. But if you
Yep.
can keep that focus, every exercise at the gym becomes a corrective exercise. Every time you're doing something, you need to be thinking, can I get my ankle in a good dorsiflexion stretch position while I'm doing this exercise to improve that while I'm getting stronger. It's awesome. That's exactly what I want to do for people. I'm not here to be the person. I don't even like patting myself on the back when I help someone like you. I just like to know that the fact that it helped you and you've used that awareness now to help yourself down the road. And again, you can always contact me for
Yeah.
additional help down the road, but that's pretty awesome. So any final last words for anyone that's interested, or just anything?
I mean, I think if you are injured, have those issues, like, first of all, get that second opinion before you go down like a road. Because had my parents not gotten the opinion of you, my dad hadn't reached out and said, like, help, like, we didn't have another option. Surgery was what they were telling us, these doctors were telling us to do. So, I mean, I would always say, like, a second opinion, and like do your own research, do your own stuff, because like you said, a physical therapist at a doctor's is only going to follow what the script says. They said hip pain, they're focusing on my hips. They're not looking at that full body. So like advocating for yourself, getting that second opinion, and like then when you do have those tools that work, like continue to use them. Don't think just because my injury is over, I'm not in pain anymore. Like my ankles are good, my hips good, I don't need to do anything ever again. It's like, no, that's something you continue have to foster, even for areas that you're not in pain.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so proud of you and so excited to have heard from you. It's so cool. I mean, again, you are like the reason why I do this, because there are so many more people out there like you that don't know that there's another option. They don't see it that way. And I'm just so glad you shared your story and you're willing to share your story with everyone, because it's very powerful. And again, what I do, and it's not a pat on my back, but I spend a lot of time studying this to help people like you. And so I hope it does, and I'm excited for that. So thanks,
Yeah.
Jordan.
Yeah, thank you as well.
All right, appreciate that.